Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. For more information about the Moffitt Method speed, strength, and conditioning programs, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Our super guest today is Coach Matthew Mullis, Director of Strength and Conditioning at Fulshear High School in Fulshear, Texas. Coach Mullis has been in the strength and conditioning field for 15 years with stops here in Baton Rouge at LSU, Louisiana Tech, and the University of Texas at El Paso. He has spent the last 7 years coaching at the high school level in the state of Texas. He is currently in his third year as the Director of Strength and Conditioning at Fulshear High School, where they have set a school record in wins each of the last 3 seasons. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Hey, it's good to be here. Long time. I'm excited.
Yes. So how long has it been since you were in Baton Rouge?
2008, which doesn't seem that long ago until you put the math to it, and that's what, 15 years now.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
A lot of water under the bridge in 15 years.
Absolutely.
Good deal. So the Chargers, man, are off to a great 8-0 start and ranked number 3 in 5A. That's special. What are some things that y'all have done that have made you guys so successful?
I believe, honestly, it's really culture, developing a culture and then creating that buy-in from the athlete. Before I got there, the school won 3 games the previous 2 years. My first year we went 5-5, which was a nice little turnaround, but kids really didn't know how to win, to be honest with you. And then Coach Caduti came in, and we kind of took off from there. He started, preaching that culture, that buy-in. In fact, I've never seen it before. We would be doing up-downs, and kids would be clapping, and we say, be better, what have you, and they're excited. They're into it. And I was like, I've never seen that before. Typically I was doing an up down, I was miserable. I was like just trying to finish it and do the best I can.
Yeah.
And so that's translated also in the weight room of kids loving to lift. They enjoy the weight room. I'd say 95% of the kids want to go in and lift. And it's one of those situations you almost have to kind of pull them back sometimes because they're so into it, especially when we're talking about in season. So it's a great change and a great culture, and the parents are a big part of it too, raising kids that are great kids and love to work, and it's almost like an old school type of feel, and it's exciting. I've been on the other end of 8-0 before, and it's miserable, let's be honest. So it's a great turnaround, and you kind of just always want to make sure that you don't ever take that for granted, because you don't know how many times you get these kind of opportunities.
Yeah. Now, is it a new school, or has it been around a while?
It opened in 2016. And so it's one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Texas right now. We're outside of Katy, probably about 15 minutes outside of Katy. And so we're getting, a bunch of kids coming in, just the simple fact we're just growing so fast. And so it opened in 2016, and you've probably heard of like Brian Kagan's. He's now the head strength coach at North Texas. He actually started, helped open the school with Coach Fleming, and it's just grown from there, needless to say.
Yeah, it's on the west side. I guess they wouldn't consider that southwest. That's more the west side of the city of Houston on the interstate. So there is a lot of room for growth there, man. There's not much when you look on the map. There's not much going west. So that's awesome.
Yeah, everything's kind of pushing out this way, just kind of further and further. Suburbs are kind of reaching further and further than what they used to. It used to be suburbs were 10 minutes away, 15
Yeah.
minutes away. We're about solid 30 minutes, 35 from downtown.
Yeah. Well, how did you tell us how you got involved in strength and conditioning and what
Well,
led you to decide that this was going to be your career path?
honestly, just like most kids growing up, your ultimate goal is to play professionally, whatever that is. My favorite sports growing up were obviously like baseball and football. And so at a certain point, you come to that realization that isn't happening. And so when I came to that realization that wasn't happening, my thought is, how can I get into athletics? My father was a assistant AD at the University of Houston for 10 years. Or I'm not sorry, not 10 years. I believe it was 3 or 4 years. And then he worked for the Oilers for 10 years, Houston
Yeah.
Oilers. And so I was around it all my life. Like I'd go into the locker room after games, and I loved it. I loved the interaction between my father and the athletes, and I just thought it was the coolest thing to have like Warren Moon come up and talk to your dad, like,
Yeah.
"Hey Mike, how you doing?" or "Hey Mullis." And so I knew I wanted to get in that somehow. And so I came, talked to Melissa Moore, the great Melissa Moore, and so I asked, "Hey, I love lifting." I was like, "Hey, is there any way I can come and intern for you?" She said yes. And so I did that for a little while, and then um, actually ended up coming to you and asking an intern as well, and try to work with football. And then I also worked with Coach Phillips' truck, bringing back a name for you, with baseball. And so I ended up moving up to that, and then from there got a GA position at UTEP, and then just kind of kept progressing. And that's how I got into it. I mean, I love lifting. I remember in high school it was 3 sets of 10 clean. Wasn't taught anything. Technique was horrible. I thought I squatted low enough till I got to to y'all. And so I just fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the art of lifting. I'd go to Coach Hatch, at night, learn to lift, watch Matt Bruce lift, and I fell in love with the technique and how just finite small little details can matter 20, 30 pounds on lifting, versus like, bench, what have you. Technique might be a little off. It is what it is, but like just a one little technical error of a clean or a jerk, and you're talking 20, 30 pounds. And I loved it. And I loved interacting with athletes. That was my little calling in my life, and I've just continued with it throughout. And I mean, it's changed my life, um, definitely for the better.
Yeah. So now, was your family from Louisiana? Is that why you came to Baton Rouge and LSU?
I had family friends, especially like my next door neighbors that were huge LSU fans.
Mm,
I actually grew up like a Texas fan.
that's
I
awesome.
saw Ricky Williams break the rushing record when I played A&M. I went to almost every A&M Texas game growing up. Um, the older I got, the more I kind of stopped falling in love with them, like especially the two big Texas schools, A&M and Texas. They were so polar opposites. And when I went to LSU, it was a little bit more in the middle. And then when I
Yeah.
saw the game day atmosphere, and I never forget the first game I saw was Middle Tennessee State against LSU. It was a homecoming game, and the atmosphere was crazier than a UT A&M game. And I asked my old neighbor at the time, I was like, "Is this normal? Is something crazy happening?" And he's like, "It's like this every week." I go, "You got to be kidding me!" And so I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the people. Um, that little area, South Louisiana, I still believe is probably the area with the friendliest people in the world. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I fell in love with it once I visited there, and it was an easy decision for me at that point.
Yeah. Now, was Earl Campbell around the Oilers when you were a kid, or had he already retired?
He was not there. No, if he was, I was maybe 3, 4 years old. I grew up more in the Warren Moon days, the run and shoot. I grew up. I'm trying to think of other names coming to mind. Eddie George. I caught the end of Eddie George.
Yeah.
When the Oilers moved to Tennessee,
Yeah.
we were expecting to move to Tennessee. It was set up that, we were going, and then anyone that wasn't under contract ended up not taking. So it was a big change for us. So we ended up staying here after that. And so ended up growing up here, which I was thankful for. Yeah, so it was an exciting time growing up.
Yeah, they spent a little bit of time in Memphis before they
Mm-hmm.
moved to Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
They're building they've been there long enough. They're building a brand new stadium for them in Nashville. So
That's crazy. It just feels like the other one was built. My dad had renderings when I was younger, and they were looking at moving. In fact, they were almost called the Tennessee Cherokees. Little known fact.
Yeah.
They were actually going to have Ohio State colors. And then it kind of changed. I remember the owner, Bud Adams, didn't want to change colors. And so that's why they kind of took it and kept pretty much the same colors. They added navy to it, but that's kind of why they kept they chose that name and kept the color scheme.
Awesome. All right, well let's talk some about your what you do at Fulshear and get into some nuts and bolts. So
Okay.
let's start off with some of the challenges that you face as a high school strength coach.
Okay. I think number one is just the athlete to coach ratio. I think it's different too with college. You have so many strength coaches. I mean, you have assistants, you have GAs, you have some interns. I think NCAA is trying putting some limits on that, but that's the biggest deal, and especially for me, a big challenge was I'm going from watching 2 to 3 racks at a time to now I have 20, and I have to see everything. And that was probably the biggest adjustment for me, especially that first year, because I'm not gonna lie to you, when you coach in college and you go the high school route, you're thinking, hey, it should be a little easier, the stresses of not, and it's not. It's
Not
more
as much
difficult.
pressure. Yeah.
Oh no. I mean, it's still the same. It's still, if your team doesn't perform, you're probably the first one still to get looked at, just like in college.
Yeah.
And you typically have the same situations where guys want to bring in their own guys and what have you. I think the second one would probably be training age, the disparity. We have kids that have been training since they were 8, and then we have kids that have never touched a weight before. And so you're trying to blend that. Kids not knowing what they're doing to basically kids that are advanced. And so when you have that situation, you're trying to, again, I'm trying to, I'm repeating myself. I got kind of cut off on the audio.
That's okay.
Trying to make it to where the kids don't fall behind that are ahead, and then the ones, you don't leave those behind. So the big deal is just making sure they're safe the entire time. And that's the difficult part, to be honest with you, is that huge training gap and trying to.
What about some of the unique challenges that you face when trying to motivate teenagers these days?
I would say number one would be I feel like kids have to know why they're doing something. That's something that's changed. You never question a coach when I was growing up. And in fact, I would never bring that to my parents either. That'd be one of those. If I was upset at a coach, I'd be in my room alone, upset at a coach. Maybe cussing under my breath or anything like that. But today they need to know why they're doing something. And so I always try to explain, hey, we're doing this because of this. We're doing this lift. It does this. It translates this way. And then I'd say secondly would probably be keeping kids' attention. Attention spans have definitely gone down over the years. And so you're a little generic, hey, we're doing this. You have to throw some curveballs sometimes just to keep attention going and keep them motivated and keep them engaged. I think those are probably the two that come to mind, to be honest with you. I always want kids knowing why they're doing something, and then they tend to perform at a higher level whenever they do know why they're doing something. So a little different than what old school was.
Yeah. So on that point, I know that getting buy-in from the kids and their parents and administration is huge in the high school setting.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you and the rest of the staff at Fulshear do to facilitate that?
Uh, Number one comes to mind for me, which I know is unique from, I would be shocked if too many schools do this. We actually, in March, when we're testing, we're getting our testing numbers in the off season. Their test, we actually invite the parents to come watch. I was very hesitant at first. This was definitely it was a Coach Caduti idea, definitely, and I was very hesitant at first. Like my mind goes to the worst possible outcome. Parents, yelling upset that you're pushing them or anything. And it was quite the opposite. Parents were in there like, come on, you got it. Do this. Let's try another one. And so it's a big shock to me. And it worked out perfect. And I think it's huge because the parents, when the kid comes home, the parents are, what'd you do today? Well, we're in the weight room. What'd you do? And like, you did this, and I'll see it. And I think they have a certain belief that it's almost like a lifetime fitness or something. It's just very casual and what have you. And it's not very intense. And then when they see it, it's like, whoa, this is crazy, and you definitely need to have your, I's dotted, T's crossed, and everything right whenever that's happening. But it's very exciting for them to see it. Another thing that comes to mind would be we do decals with parents before the season starts.
Yeah.
It's typically moms and dads come in and they help put the decals on for them, and they really enjoy it. And I think anytime you have that buy-in from parents, administration is going to be happy for them to be involved. They trust the coaches. They trust their kids being with those coaches. And I think that's huge across the board when you're talking about all three of those.
Yeah, that was something that they started at Catholic High.
Oh, really?
I didn't do it with the first two, and it was pretty neat because when you're traveling and going to an away game, you leave Friday at around noon,
Mm-hmm.
and so I missed a lot of Clay and Aaron's games because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now their games were televised on. They have this thing. The school has its own like broadcast network, where they live stream the games.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could watch them, but I was watching them on my phone. I was never really able to, see them on the TV. So I was always looking at my little phone. And then Brady's sophomore year, they did it. And so the boys cleaned the helmet and then they put them in their locker. So when practice was over, the dads and moms or uncles, whoever was available, would show up, and the coach would show the parents how to put the C and the stripes on it. And then we as parents would write a little note and put it in the helmet and then go put it back in their locker. So,
like that.
yeah. So this stripe was Brady's sophomore year. That was his junior year, and that was his senior year. So this phone, this is an iPhone 2, I think. But I put those stripes on there because I always felt terrible when the older two were playing and I was in some nasty hotel somewhere off in nowhere. And so I said, no matter what, I'm getting sentimental here, but no matter what, there'd always be a part of Brady with me, whether I was there or not. So yeah, I thought that's one of the coolest things. And then, because they went to Catholic, a priest would then bless their helmets. And he was a former football player who played college football. Big dude, man. Looked like he played for the New Orleans Saints. And
Wow.
he would bless the kid's helmet, and he put a little extra in there because he played ball himself. So I always thought that was a super, super cool tradition. And they still do it today. So that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right.
That's probably still the hardest thing is like every now and then I'll come home after not seeing my son and they'll go, I miss you, Daddy. I'm like, oh God. It's like just tears at you. Like never thought it would back in the day. And then once you have them, it's completely different.
Yeah, and that's why, you and I were talking off the air earlier. That's why Clay, Aaron, and Brady were always in the weight room every chance I could get.
Mm-hmm.
Those three, they got Clay talks about it still, he got his head stuck in the toilet, and they gave him swirlies, and he tells a story about somebody stuffing him in a trash can, and but those kids, all three of them grew up there in the weight room, and they got picked on and bullied by the players, and that was good
Mm-hmm.
for them.
Yep.
Mr. Shillings in the equipment room gave them,
Mm-hmm.
they'd go in there and steal popcorn from Mr. Shillings, and he would get on them. And but that's good for young men.
It's good
Now,
exposure.
um, you know, Melissa's daughter is there a lot also. So
Oh,
you
really?
mentioned Melissa before. Yeah, and so Melissa would even bring her daughter, and it's good for kids. Every atmosphere is a little different, so you gotta, it depends on where you are and who you work for. But it was always okay here to bring the kids in, and so we did. Man, Jill would drop them off, and I wouldn't even see them.
Oh, yeah.
They would
Yeah, we
run
do that. We
wild
do
with
that
all those
here.
other kids. Yeah, they would
There's a
run
bunch of
wild.
kids. Yeah, we'll be here on a Saturday, and there's about 10 kids just running around. And you're like, it's mayhem.
Yeah,
Come up early, watch film, and Saturday, Sunday, it's accepted. Like Coach Giddy's brought a culture that's, hey, if something happens and I have to take him, wife's
yeah,
working, she's at anything crazy, if I
yeah,
have to and I need to bring him in, he's definitely for it. He wants that family atmosphere, which
yeah.
is huge. It's
That's
huge.
the way Coach Saban was. I remember it was funny. We'd had a bad practice, and we were in the meeting room after practice, and he said the hardest hit all practice long was the kids over there hitting dummies. He goes, the kids over there, I don't know whose kids they are, but they hit harder than anybody on our team. So it was funny.
Oh,
All
that's
right, so
awesome.
let me ask you this: how many sports do you work with there at the school?
I'm available for all of them in terms of writing and planning. I
Yeah.
work out every sport, every athlete, even through junior high when SAC camp happens. We call it SAC camp. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
strength and conditioning through the summer. But as of right now, like I'm actually teaching World Geo during the
Oh,
day, coaching football, and so I don't have the periods to do that. It's something
yeah.
hopefully down the road we can pull off. But I typically write for a couple of sports, and if they need any help with anything, especially the program, and we utilize
Yeah.
Rack Coach, I help them in any regard I can.
Yeah.
But it's typically just football as of right now, definitely
Yeah.
for lifting
And
them.
so the other sport coaches are responsible for programming for their sports as well.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And
wow.
like I said, if
Okay,
they
cool.
need help or they want me to write it, I'm here for them to do it, and
Yeah.
I've done it before, and
Yeah.
I enjoy it. To be honest with you.
Yeah. And that's why we started our business. And,
Hmm.
that's what we do, whether it is football, baseball, basketball, volleyball, tennis.
Hmm.
We have a tennis team that we, program for. And so that's why we started the business. Awesome. How many
Yep.
athletes are in the school? Do you know?
Ooh, athletes. How many? No, the number of athletes. I'm trying to think offhand. I know football, just upper class when we're not counting freshmen. We have, I want to say 105,
Yeah.
and then freshmen we're close to. I want to say we're 80, 85 ish.
Yeah. That's
And
amazing.
so we've gotten a situation. We've grown so fast that like especially during the season for football, we actually split them in half. So we'll
Yeah.
go, defense will come lift 25, 30 minutes, and offense will watch film, and then we'll flip halfway
Yeah.
just to where once you get more than 4 kids on a rack, we have 20
Yeah.
racks. So 80 is that
Slows it down.
critical number. Once you get above that, it's very difficult to be effective and efficient doing
Yeah.
it. So we've had to split it in that regard. But we have tons of athletes, very successful in volleyball, softball. We're definitely growing. I think we had it's called a Gold Cup in Texas where they take into account everything, every sport. They take into account extracurricular activities as well. And I want to say we finished third in Texas. And so we've had good results in terms of kids participating in sports, and the administration knows how important sports are for the to the success of the school itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's how we did it when I was in college. We didn't have that many meeting rooms, and our weight room wasn't big enough. So the offense would lift while the defense met, and then we flip-flop, and then we went to practice. So that's a long-standing practice right there. That's proven itself time and time again.
It definitely is.
Okay, so how do you plan and program on a year-round basis for the football program there?
Off first thought, that's probably one of my big pet peeves. I feel like I get it every year, and it doesn't matter the sport, to be honest with you, is you get that, you get coaches that are, hey, it's your turn now whenever the off season hits. And it's like, it's not my turn. This is a year round process. It really is. And so, we want kids. Well, I mean, I'd say about 95% of our kids get stronger during the season. Now, I know a lot of that's just the age. They're going to get bigger. Some of it's like, neuromuscular adaptation and what have you. But we take pride in that. We lift, 3 to 4 days a week in season. And so we end up typically in the off season, we do more of that, full body Monday, Wednesday, Friday, speed work Tuesday, Thursday, and we mix in. We have like a deal similar to fourth quarter at the beginning. We're trying to kind of build that aerobic base, and you're back into that teaching aspect, and it's building discipline, and it's a little bit more higher volume base. And then we transition that summer. The weird thing about summer here is in Texas, you can only work out Monday through Thursday during the summer. Friday has to be off. So manipulating that, typically what happens when you talk about, kids showing up, because it's not mandatory, obviously. Kids showing up, it trickles down every single day. You got a little bit less kids every single day. And so since we go Monday through Thursday, we typically, I do more of an explosive pull emphasis. So you're any kind of like plyo squat jumps, what have you, barbell squat jumps, cleans, snatches, what have you. We do typically on Monday and Wednesday. And then we do heavy pressing and heavy strength on Tuesday, Thursday, just because I don't want kids missing, a lower body day. And I don't think upper body deserves 50% of my, our time and energy when it's, it's a ground-based sport. So that's typically how we break it down in terms of off season and what have you. But we also lift on game days too. And during the season, we go real heavy on Monday. Wednesday is a little bit more explosive. I teeter down the percentages just a little bit. I always say explosive. I don't like saying light, because I know you were kind of the same way, that if I say light, just naturally the kids just say, hey, it's an easy day.
It's easy.
And so I always try to say explosive when I'm putting that in there, or if I'm doing a deload at all, I always try to say, hey, it's an explosive day. And that's kind of how we interpret it. But we lift heavy a lot. We do. It's a lower volume, except for the off season. I actually like doing hypertrophy on Fridays, just because you have 2 extra days to recover and building that good lean muscle mass. But besides that, it's typically lower rep, higher percentage, and then I don't ever dabble high percentage in season. It's lower, and I'm trying to make it as heavy as possible without any kind of issues of being sore. We've had great results in terms of, man, I hate saying this. I don't want to jinx it. In terms of, I'm going to avoid. You can guess what I'm saying. I'm about to say about, the I and J word. But we've done really well in that regard. And so, philosophy is, hey, if you want to be healthy, you need to be strong, and you need to have good mobility. And you have both those things, typically good things happen.
Yeah. So on the point about not wanting to say easy or light. I would always tell our guys that light meant fast. It didn't mean easy.
Yep.
And so I think that's a good point. And also, you got to train year round. Strength diminishes if you don't practice it. It's just like anything else. So a lot of people will either train their butts off all season and then totally step out of the weight room and not train at all, or lift so light that there is no stimulus, for the guys, and then they get weaker. They're lifting, but they're going through the motions because you've got to train, and you got to train heavy at times during the season in order to maintain that strength, because you either use it or you lose it. And that's all there is to it.
And I've been on the other side where you start winning and the coach is like, hey, let's go lighter, or we don't need to lift this week. And it just keeps, it's almost like an avalanche. And then at the end of the year, up front, we're getting obliterated. And everyone's looking at it like, what could be the cause of the problem? I go, we're getting weaker, we're getting smaller, we're losing weight, which naturally happens in season. And you magnify, you make it even worse if you're not lifting and staying at least a minimum of 2 full body days a week. You're going to tend to drop off at some point in time. And so I've been on that other end, and thankfully here that's not the case. We want to be stronger than our opponent in the playoffs, towards the end of the season, playoffs, so on, to where that's not a worry. If we get beat, it's an athlete thing, or, just had a bad day. It's not, has nothing to do with how strong we are, or lack thereof, or losing it during the season. That's not something I want to experience again, to be honest with you.
Yeah. How do y'all handle the multi-sport athletes, the guys that, play other sports?
We typically have these athletes stay in our period. And so they stay in football. And that way they have an off season still. Now, if the kid plays baseball and he's pitching the next day type deal, then we work with them and do it, especially if they're on varsity. We're not quite as worried about it. If they're JV or freshman, then we try to still stay heavy, and then we'll emphasize. If you look at some of these strength programs, even like baseball, like TCU lives game days, TCU stays strong, and it shows. And so I always tell our athletes too, when they're freshmen, I'm like, you got to look long picture, okay? Because I'll start with them very low. I teach technique big time, especially after practice when I have them 2 days a week during the seasons, really when I typically start with them. And so I go, you got to look picture. I couldn't tell you what my freshman record was. Like, in the grand scheme of things, you want to win. You want them to be exposed to winning at an early age. At the same time, what are you doing junior and senior year? Are you stronger? You have good mobility? I mean, I always like to look at the big picture of that. And you not pitching a JV game as well as you thought you could. And that's an old school mantra that I always try ending as fast as possible with, hey, it's because I lifted heavy and what have you. And now it should be looked at vice versa. And so we try to keep them in the same sport. We try to, especially our athletes that aren't playing like baseball, basketball, we try to have them do track. Our O-line, D-line, a lot of times will do wrestling to start at the beginning of the off season as well, just so they can bend. And there's also a toughness aspect. We didn't have wrestling when I was growing up where I'm from. And first time I experienced that was a couple of years ago here. And I was like, this is completely different than what I thought it was. Yeah. I mean, it's intense. And so it's a good competition. It's just you and the other guy on the mat, and there's no hiding from it. It's similar to track too. You have numbers, you either win or lose. There's no air for anything being subjective. And so we try to push the track deal, especially on our skill guys, and then even our big guys, if they're not, once they're done with wrestling, we try to push them to be throwers, throwing shot and disc. And so we found that to be very helpful because on the rare occasion you don't have anybody playing a different sport, or they play a sport and they don't have an off season, they tend to not make that growth like our other athletes do. So we do a good job of trying to keep the athletes in the sport, in the period, as much as possible. And then we work around their schedule of if they're varsity again, like they're pitching the next night, then we take that into account. We might go a little bit more explosive instead of lighter. But that's typically how we roll, and we've got great results with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So if I were to walk in your weight room this morning, what would I see? And is there anything that I wouldn't see across the country?
I'll be honest with you, and we've had recruiters come in and look, and they tell us all the time it looks like a Division I weight room, and not just the weight room itself. The weight room is really nice, but the kids get after it. We play the music. We have a great sound system in there. It's loud. If Lincoln Park comes on, I'll put it a little extra louder. I still remember that. And we mix up the music and stuff to where it's not all rap, not all rock. It's a good balance. But the kids are getting after it, and they're loud. They enjoy it. It literally does remind me of LSU when I was there. Like, the kids enjoy it, which is huge. And so that's definitely something we inhibit. So besides that, I mean, it's similar to a lot of other deals, other schools, to be honest with you, but it's just different. It's a mindset. And like I said, the up downs, like if they don't have their stuff on time and ready to roll, it's up downs. They start clapping, cheering, and it's just, they don't walk in the weight room. Once they hit that weight room door, they're running. And I think it just, that energy feeds off that versus just kids kind of just piling in one by one, walking in, loading the weight, because we have everything on the screen anyway, so they see what it is. But again, it's something special. Like, it's like, I know it's not normal other places I've been where you're trying to get kids motivated to lift. It's, again, most of my times rearing kids back, like saying, hey, let's tame it down a little bit, especially when we get into game day lifts. I got kids like trying to goblet squat 125-pound dumbbells, and it's just like, all right, I love it. And I was like, you just got to be careful with that. Last thing I want is something happening to a kid on game day. But I'd much rather have that problem than the other problem any day of the week. Kids that just don't like the weight room, don't like working out.
Yeah, when I was coaching in high school, our head coach's son played baseball, and he was a pitcher. And so first game of the season, he comes in the weight room, and I said, all right, your dad said you're pitching today, so we're not going to do anything. And he goes, no, I'm good, coach, I'm good. I said, no, your dad said, because his dad was the head football coach, and the head baseball coach. And he goes, no, I'm good. I said, no, your dad said you're not to do anything today. And he goes, oh, come on, coach. So I said, all right. Twist my arm. So I let him I let him lift. And so everything went fine. No big deal. Next game, and all he did was some hang cleans and stuff like that. He goes, I'm just going to do some cleans. I'll be fine. Okay. So next game, I said, hey, your dad said you're pitching today. Let's make sure we don't do anything, etc. Oh, I'm good. And then he did a little bit more. And then next game, hey, your dad said, make sure you don't do too much today. You're pitching against so-and-so, and, let's not go heavy. He goes, oh, okay, coach, I'm good. I look over there. He's squatting the house. So that night his dad calls me up, and he got after me good. He said he couldn't even reach home plate with the fastball. So the next day I was like, dude, you got me in trouble last night. Your dad was ticked off, and he called me on the phone, and he goes, he'll be okay. I know he's not. He's my boss. So I had to really monitor him, and that's it's great because I loved the time that I coached. I mean, I loved it in high school, and I've always wanted to tell this story, but now's as good a time as ever. So, we had, a lunch break, and when you were in, I didn't have, that was my planning period. Lunch was my planning period because there's no way, you could eat lunch and then come work out or work out and then wash up and then be able to have time to go eat lunch. So that was my planning period during lunch break. And I would always go in the cafeteria and sit down and eat with the kids, or I would go sit in the kitchen where they were cooking to eat, or I would sit outside on a park bench or something like that. So one day I got my lunch and I went to the weight room and I had the lights out in my office and I was just sitting in there chilling, eating my lunch. And 3 boys walk in the weight room. And I was like, what are these clowns doing? And so they got on the squat racks and they climbed up on the squat racks, hooked their legs over the squat rack, and they were hanging upside down like bats with their arms hanging down. And then they would climb down off the squat rack and then they would do push-ups. And then they would climb back up on the squat racks, hang their legs over the rack and hang upside down. And they did this 2 or 3 times. And I was like, one of them's going to fall and crack his head open or break his neck. So I turned the lights on and they freak out. And I go over there. I was like, guys, what are y'all doing? They said, Coach, we're trying to pump up our upper body. We heard that if you hang upside down and superset it with push-ups, your upper body will get bigger. And I was like, get out of here. So I had to start locking the weight room during lunch period. So I thought I'd share that.
No, that's funny. I like pictured it too. I can like visually see them hanging
kids,
from like our
high school kids, man. They weren't scared of anything.
Mm-mm.
All right. Now, do y'all use any technology there at Fulshear? Do y'all have any technology available?
Yeah, we actually use like I said before, Rack Coach.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we have 2 big 75-inch TVs. We have one on the front right of the weight room and one on the back left, where everybody can see one of those 2 screens.
Yeah.
And so that's helped tremendously in terms of like I don't even have to print out sheets anymore.
Yeah.
It goes straight to it. They can see, hey, this is my number. It keeps track of racks. I can actually sort racks of who I want being there. When you take into account, I like taking into account height and then back squat max for grouping them together. And then I look at it and go, well, I don't like these 3 players together. And then I'll kind of manipulate it from there. It took some getting used to be honest with you, because I was straight on the whistle at the high school level. And so it was a control thing in terms of it's like you kind of lose control, like you don't have that control anymore. But the thing I found out is I was able to add about 2 to 3 sets in the same time, because you get caught up when you're coaching and it's your turn to blow the whistle and you're like just a little bit behind, and all that just always adds up. So I've noticed that I can add like 2 to 3 sets of the total workout, which is huge
because you're not blowing the whistle.
You get caught up coaching. Everybody does. Secondly, we utilize a Catapult GPS system. We have about 10 of those.
Awesome.
And so I try to rotate who has them certain weeks, trying to see how fast they can run, power, energy spent, and you can transfer that data from practice, see how we're practicing. Are we practicing? Is it the same type energy system and what have you? Which is huge. And the coolest thing I found is like being able to put it into perspective, because you hear, hey, you do this to this. Well, when I do a deload week, you're supposed to be faster and stronger, 1 to 2 weeks typically. It ranges on the athlete. But our fastest times were really the week after and the week after that after the deload. And so to actually see that is just huge. It like kind of reasserts what you're doing is correct at that time, which is awesome. Being able to put that in perspective and be able to see, hey, this is what we're doing is right is huge for the athletes, especially as a strength coach. Seeing that is awesome. And then the third one coming to mind is free lap. We do the free lap deal, especially in the summer. We end up, kids can see how fast they're running. It's good for competition as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers don't lie. And
Yeah.
so usually typically 1 to 2 times a week and during the summer and
Good.
off season, we'll have them utilize that just to see themselves get faster and see that number translate, which is huge.
Yeah. All right. So that leads us into my next question. Can you talk about the running program and how much effort do you put into trying to get the guys faster?
Running program's huge. We try to pair it with our lifting. So whenever we are lifting explosive, like just give you an example, summer, our explosive pull days are typically that Monday, Wednesday, where we're doing mostly pulls, mostly explosive deals. We take that and we do more linear, straight line, top end speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tuesday, Thursday is more of a COD, change of direction, coupled with some plyometrics, bounding, jumps, depth drops. And we're working a little bit more on the acceleration phase of those two. But it's critical in terms of speed, being able to do that. And that's where I said that free lap comes in real handy, as you can see it.
Yeah.
And so kids typically are definitely getting faster during the year.
Yeah.
Typically right after the seasons, typically our kids are speed goes down a little bit just because you have so many practices that it's different energy system, and it's whereas off season you're just straight training. That's it really. And so it's more of that explosive, that fast twitch training style, and that translates, especially when you're talking about 40s and change of direction, pro agility, so on and so on.
Yeah. And you post those times so they know it. And there's no, I run 4.3 when no, you really don't run 4.3. You're fast, you run 4.5, but you don't run 4.3.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I like about posting the running and testing results and stuff. So that gives the guys a clear picture of what they really accomplished and not something that, they imagined.
Oh yeah. No, it's big for them to see it. That's typical. We do a lot of feed the cats type deal, and then stuff I've learned from you and stuff I learned from Coach Hester, strength coach at Tulane.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
kind
you
of
were with
manipulate
him
all
at
that
La
together
Tech, right?
to create
You
that
were,
program.
yeah, you were there at La Tech with Kurt, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And him,
So
he's really
yeah,
he's one of the best too. I
yeah,
mean,
he gets
it
so
was
fired
awesome to
up.
learn from him as well.
Yeah, yeah, he's fast himself for an old man. He can fly.
I saw that. He saw the flying tens.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's faster than I am, and he's
yeah.
probably 15, 20 years older than me. It's not even close. So
So I'm a big believer in post-activation potentiation. I've always advocated for doing things on the day of competition. Do you have a game day routine in the weight room for the Chargers? And was this something that you had to sell to the team and the staff in order to do?
I'm definitely with you about the PAP, post activation potentiation. We lift on game days. It's literally 20 minutes max. We typically start with a squat jump barbell, and then I transition it to a split barbell split squat jump about halfway through. It took like 4 or 5 weeks. Last year, we actually switched from that to just speed squat real light,
Yeah,
and we ended up losing. And so that was our one loss last year. And so I had every kid come up the next day and was like, hey, we got to change this back. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I changed it back and just changed some other stuff. And we didn't lose again until third round of the playoffs. And so I've kind of kept that same deal this year. That's how I split it up. But I basically just try covering every plane and what have you. And I'm trying to get every muscle. I'm trying to recruit every muscle I can for that's going to be involved that night. So typically it's like a squat jump, speed bench. We'll mix that in sometimes with like basically you take a med ball, do an RDL to the bottom of the knee, and then you actually just all upper body, just a straight slam, both hands right to the ground.
yeah,
Do side lunges just about every time, just so I can get outside that plane. And and it's really helped us. And like I said, again, that's one of those situations where I have to like kind of pull everybody back.
Yeah.
And it's a good feeling, but it's an amped up thing. The kids love it. They come in hyped up. That's the one day I don't care. They get to pick the music,
Ooh.
and it's as loud as possible.
Yeah.
And other days I'll
That's
throw in
awesome.
stuff that heavy rock and
Yeah.
an older rap and some country every now and then just to mix it up.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure some of it is like a little bit of a placebo type thing, but
Yeah,
it's something
is.
that
Yeah.
we embrace, and it's something I didn't have to sell at all. Coach Caduti even came to me and said, "Hey, we want to lift game day? I like doing that." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that." Well, he used to be a strength coach,
Yeah.
and so he knows all about it, so that I didn't have to sell anything. And I'm sure we had coaches like that year that were like, I don't like this, and you're going to have that no matter what you do. But there was no selling of the coach, which was huge for me. That was a great feeling to be able to do that and kind of explore. And so we've kind of found our little niche of what to do. And I'll switch it up some, but it's always going to start with a squat jump. And I'm not changing that again unless we lose a couple in a row or something, and I can finally change it. But I got to take into account how the kids respond to that stuff, and if it's a big deal and they're superstitious, I'm gonna roll with it. I'm gonna do my best to where we're not gonna have that excuse ever again. So, but like I said, we do that, and we do a lot of the PAP with in the season. We do some French contrast stuff. We'll do like a really heavy front squat with a depth drop, and then we'll transition that to a depth drop to a jump, and then we'll do bench, really heavy bench, and then we'll do plyo push-ups and stuff just to excite that neuromuscular system. And so it's worked really well for us. I'm a big proponent of it. Do I think part of it's a little bit of a placebo? Absolutely. But they enjoy it. It's another time to get in the weight room. It's another time to get better and perfect your craft in there. So I'm all for it.
Yeah. And if you're winning, what does it matter?
No. It's hard to question when you're winning.
Yeah. If you're listening to the Moffitt Method podcast, we know you're obsessed with helping your athletes succeed. So are we. At Perch, we are built by and for coaches who want to give you the tools to help your athletes on the weight room floor deliver immediate feedback and help you and your athletes optimize performance. Perch is a small camera that enables velocity-based training among many other areas of performance monitoring, from technique to assessments and beyond. Okay, now back to the podcast. Okay, so I got a quick question here. Do the young, and I think I know the answer to this because of some of our conversations, but do the young players follow the same in-season program as the starters, or do they do extra for their development?
So freshmen, like I said, Monday, Tuesday. So I know Louisiana. So I coached there 1 year high school at Ruston. I think they play underclassmen games on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, which is different than us. If we have a typical Friday game, our underclassmen, both JV and freshmen, play on Thursday, and if it's a Thursday game, they play on Wednesday. So like typically Monday, Tuesday, after practice, I take the freshmen in. They usually go out practice 7th period, and then I'll transition in that time where varsity will go out there and practice as well, or I should say upperclassmen will go out and practice as well. And so once they finish freshmen, I go in and lift them for about 30 minutes. Mondays and Tuesdays typically. Sometimes we'll do Wednesdays as well. And from there, I mean, it's straight, no bar. And the first thing I teach them is really what to do before you even get to the bar, in terms of like how the rack coach works, loading the bar as fast as can be, how the rack should look before and after when you're done, which bar we use when. We have 2 bars. So we're blessed to have. We have like a Texas Power Bar, and then we have a silver Olympic bar. I believe it's Intech. And so I mix up. We use a silver bar for cleans, obviously, and Olympic stuff, and front squats as well, so they can rotate their elbows all the way up. And then, with back squat, benching, pressing, it's typically the Texas Power Bar. And so I teach them all of that. I teach them the routine. First man, first set, we yell that every single time that horn goes off. So I teach them that, and so they basically know the whole routine first and what's expected of them. And after that, it's straight no bar. it's straight teaching. I teach them the squat, heel elevated, no weight. I teach them the hinge, separating those two. I used to always teach the clean progression first, and I've gotten better results with teaching the hinge first and the squat first.
Yeah.
Because on hang clean, typically we teach that eccentric movement down just to kind of stretch that hamstring. It's almost like a rubber band stretching and pulling. And you typically can produce a little bit more power. So they need to learn that hinge even for that, for barbell bent row, for RDL. And then they need to teach the squat, obviously, all the variations we do. And so I teach them really the heel elevated all the way through front squat. I mean, do goblet squat, front squat, back squat. Then I take out that 10-pound plate, and then they're good to go from there. And then we start actually doing stuff, but it's a slow process. I teach those movements first. The last thing I ever want is, to see kids that are just shaking and can't control the weight coming up. I believe a good person to reference that too also is Army. If you watch Army videos when they lift, when you see them move that weight up on those videos, it's just impressive. It's explosive. They can control it all, going eccentrically and concentrically back up. And so I teach those movements first before they even get into heavy weights. And so I work with them. Where it gets tricky is if we have new players come in or new athletes come in right before the season starts and they're in that lifting group. When we do that, we try to check to make sure they know what to do. And if, try to figure out what their training age is. And if they've never lifted before, I tend to try to put them in the back corner with a couple other coaches that have a good idea of what to do. And then I always kind of keep checking back with them to make sure. And I really don't want them lifting much weight at all, to be honest with you. At that point in time, I just want them to be safe and be part of the team and actually know how everything works. And then once that off season hits and we get back to the base, that's where we can teach. And a lot of times too, we'll spend time after school with them. If they don't know what they're doing, I'll go in there and say, hey, I'll take them right through the basics, almost like I'm teaching them like freshmen. But that's the trickiest part is I don't like slowing down guys that, know exactly what to do. But I also don't want kids getting hurt that don't know what to do either. So it's that balance. That's probably one of the hardest parts about being a high school strength coach, to be honest with you, is trying to blend it and kind of find that middle ground, to be honest with you.
Yeah, when I first started here at LSU, they wanted our freshmen to work out in the first group every day, and that was my largest group of upperclassmen. So I would always we would have 45 or 50 guys in the weight room. Half of them were freshmen that have never touched a barbell, really, for all intents and purposes. They maybe touched them, but not the right way. And then we had our most influential players, and that was a madhouse. I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how many feeder schools do y'all have?
We have, what's nice, it's different than like our neighboring districts, because I was at KDISD, Cinco Ranch, before I came here. They had different junior highs feed into them. And like part of those junior highs would actually go to a different high school. Here, It's nice. Our junior high is literally 100 yards from our high school. And then our sixth grade campus is literally 100 yards, and we're kind of like right in the middle. So it's nice to be able to have that feeder system. We'll go check on them football-wise as well as strength-wise, and they'll come over and they'll do stuff on our field. And then that way we can watch them, and I can actually keep an eye too in terms of strength and conditioning when they come over as well, so they get used to the weight room and what it's like. So it's actually pretty nice. I mean, there's nobody coming in from a different school besides that school. So it's nice. Now it's created kind of an overcrowded type deal at the same time, but it's nice to be that close versus, at a previous school, I might be 10, 15 minutes away from that school. And so they don't ever get to experience it unless they played on our field. So that is a good thing about where we're located right now. That convenience is really nice.
All right. Do y'all have pre and post game meals available for the team on Fridays?
It's nice because we have that all the way down through freshmen. And so they actually all eat before the game. The parents is, again, where the parents come in. They're huge. We have awesome parents. They actually help feed them, and they'll feed the kids, and it's different every week, different types of food and what have you. And then district wise, if it's our district's different than most in terms of we're spread out. So we might have a game that's an hour 15 away. It's kind of similar to Louisiana in that term.
Yeah.
A district game might be an hour away, hour 15 away. And so if that's the case, then we can serve them food. There's a certain distance, I forgot what that number is there, where we can serve food right after the game so they can eat. And so it actually works out quite well. But we do that all the way to the underclassmen the day before. We feed them right when they get there. And so that's huge for us.
Yeah. That goes
regard.
a long way. And, that's how we did it at Catholic. So if they played somebody here in Baton Rouge, then they would eat after the game at the school, and it would be a grab and go. You could either grab it, sit down and eat it, and it was always a big, gigantic plate full of jambalaya or something like that. It was always really good. Or you could take it home and eat it. So you could either eat it there at the school or at home. And then if it was an away game, then they would get something similar to that as they got on the bus. And so that has to do with your parents' buy-in, because if mom and dad are spending that much time and effort at the school, making sure that everybody on your team has what they need in order to be successful, they're going to make sure that the kids do what they're supposed to do too. Mm-hmm. I know I would, if I'm doing that, I'm making sure that Clay, Aaron, and Brady are doing what they're supposed to do for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. What about post-workout snacks or RTDs? Do y'all have anything like that? Or is, that they can buy like in a drink machine, Core Powers or something like that? Do y'all do anything of that nature?
We typically, we try to give them milk, chocolate milk if possible.
Yeah.
We just try to not get in that situation of like what we can and can't give. But the positive is where we're located with the upperclassmen in terms of the time of the day is once they get done lifting, they go right to lunch. So that's a positive in that regard. Wow. And so it works out pretty nice. Now we do preach nutrition quite a bit because, we have kids that'll go there and just eat flaming Cheetos and stuff like that. And so we have to preach all the time, having that balance of protein and carbs and making sure it's good carbs, not junk.
Yeah.
So we're constantly preaching the nutrition here. And so, but it also does help that we have lunch right after for the upperclassmen.
Yeah. So who handles the injured players during the workout? Are there ATCs available for the athletes during the day?
So typically how we break it down is if kids are injured, they need to see the trainer before school. So it's typically, we start school later than most. We start school 8:25, which is late for high school. But the training room opens at 7:30. And so they're supposed to come in. If they have any injury or any discomfort, they go into the trainer at 7:30. And then it's kind of communicated to everybody. So-and-so's hurt. This is what they can do. This is what they can't do. And then if that excuse is gone, they don't go to the trainer, then obviously we can't be too hurt. So we try to, hey, you still need to do it. We modify though. If someone's got a hurt shoulder, I always say all the time, you got 3 limbs at work. Amen, and so we're going to work out all 3 limbs, and you strengthen. Body's crazy. You strengthen one side, you strengthen the other. Yeah. And so that's what we always preach to them. You can do something. That way too, when you come back from injury, typically in better shape than those to return to the field. So we preach that all the time. Typically I modify it. If they have like wrist issues, instead of doing a clean, we'll do like a really heavy clean pull from the hang position or something like that. But we modify it to where they're still getting really good work, and it's not going to be that big of a transition. Say they're out for a few weeks anyway. It's not going to be that big of a transition to get back on the field. They're not going to be out of shape. They've actually been getting work in. But typically, it's like I said, it's communicated at that 7:30. If they're there at 7:30, then we have a pretty good idea of who's hurt and who's not, and then modifications that may be made. the big twist is if, doctor's note or something like that, because I'll be real, like doctors, typically they're a CYA type deal. They, don't do any activity, don't do this. And, they take typically one class and in terms of weight training. And so that's probably the difficulty of being able to keep them still grinding, if they're capable. Obviously, sometimes they're not capable to do that. That's a different deal. But that's typically how we break it down. It's worked pretty well for us.
Yeah. How have you grown or changed as a coach throughout the years?
I would say honestly, it's kind of cliche. Having kids, your own kids, changes you. Used to, it was just about motivating, yelling, trying to get. I still do that quite a bit, but it changes when you have a kid. It really does. And so I have 3, and so my mindset's kind of changed. Like, I want my kids to be coached really hard. I want my kids to be, obedient to coaches, anybody that's, an adult. At the same time, like, you kind of catch yourself sometimes when you're doing that a lot, that you tend to be a little bit more negative than you should be. And so I want my kids, I want to be able to say what I want my kids having me as a coach. And that's kind of how I look at it. And so anytime I'm trying to think in my head mentally, what I'm doing, is it right, wrong, what have you, am I a little too hard, a little too lenient? I kind of go back to that question, is like, would I want my kid to be experiencing what me yelling or anything like that right now, versus not? And so that's definitely changed my perspective on coaching. Is you tend to be more empathetic too when you have the kids. To be honest with you, I never understood. I always thought that was kind of a cop out growing up. Is like, you have kids, and so it changes you, and and then like when you have it, it's like, wow, you're right.
Yeah.
It definitely changes you. Secondly, I would say being able to see everything at once. I wouldn't say I see everything, but I see substantially a lot more than I used to. I can look back, I can go to the front of the weight room, and I can see something going on in the back right, even if I'm not looking over there. I mean, it's amazing when you get older and wiser, you see a lot more. And so I think it's pivotal to do that, and pivotal to also see like how you coach, record yourself coaching. I think that'll change your perspective on everything too, like your mannerisms, all that. And it just all kind of ties together. And it all kind of comes back to that single thought. Would I want my kids being coached by myself at this time or later on? That's kind of how I look at everything these days.
Yeah. So if you were planning to build a new weight room at FHS, and this question is for the other coaches out there that are in a position like you, okay? So if you were planning to build a new weight room, what would be the 2 most important pieces of equipment that you would have on your list starting out?
Oh, man, I would say one would be, man, that's a tough one with typing it down to 2.
Yeah.
When I got there, so it was built in 2016. And like I said, it was designed actually by Brian Kagans. And he designed it pretty similar to how I would have designed it. But the one thing I've noticed, I've replaced one barbell. There was 0 replaced before I got there. I've replaced one barbell. And so what is it, 7, 8 years old? I've replaced 2 plates. Besides that, the meat and potatoes all work great. So I would say really the flooring, the racks, the barbells, and the bumper plates. If you get those taken care of, you're in great shape.
Yeah.
Meat and potatoes.
Yeah. So flooring, racks, barbells, weights, pretty fundamental
Hmm.
stuff right there.
Oh yeah.
Now that's,
I hate limiting it down to 2 because those are all they all
yeah,
like tie
well,
into. They're just
that's
yeah.
your LSU education. Okay. I was just fixing to educate you. That's okay though. That's common among
Hey, it
people that
works.
graduate from LSU. 2 equals 4. I mean,
Sound like the coaches I coach with right
yeah,
now.
yeah. All right. So now, all right, next question. And I never used to ask these questions until I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago for a guy, and he started throwing out some theoretical questions at the end, and I kind of liked it. So
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple for you. Okay, so now this one is easier. I don't think you have to count. Okay, so if there was something that you needed or wanted now, all right, that's not currently in the weight room that you don't have access to, what would that be?
Mm-hmm.
Because you got a nice weight room, all right.
Oh
So
yeah,
I mean, compared to
it's
what,
kind of like being a millionaire and wanting, a bunch of
yeah,
stuff.
wanting a
Like
new
you already
car,
got
yeah,
everything you need. Man, I would say if no money was involved, it
yeah,
would be
doesn't matter. Yeah,
velocity based training tools. I
okay,
love that, and I think it's another way for kids to compete in the weight room too, especially on explosive days.
yeah,
Being able to see that number up there and like, hey, I could literally just go up to two guys that are highly competitive and go, like, hey, so he's a little bit more explosive than you today. And typically that's going to raise that other kid up, and he's going to know, hey,
yeah,
I got a little bit more in me.
yeah,
More realistic in terms of price would probably be trap bars.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
I like
Two very good answers.
trap bar jumps, and then I like talk about carries, and then for basketball kids too, I love trap bar deads for how long their limbs are. I think it's a great tool for, especially asking those 6'8" kids to bend like that.
Yeah,
I love trap bar training as well. That'd be probably the more realistic addition. Money not an option. That would probably be velocity base um, tools just to help out with.
yeah,
I mean, I just think that's knowing exactly where your kids are at, and I think you could also take into account when to deload and not deload
yeah,
as well when you see
exactly.
that. I think you
Well,
add all those together.
you honestly deload individually on a daily basis if if you're
Mm-hmm.
using it because um and I've never seen the white papers, but we've all heard that strength can fluctuate between 25 and 35% a
Mm-hmm.
day. So uh you know my bench max, let's say I bench 300 pounds, I could uh my bench could be considerably higher, like 30%. Man, that's a big jump. You're looking at 90 pounds or more, or it could be considerably lighter. Um, so, yeah, uh, when a guy's not hitting those velocities, and it's easy, well, if the bar's moving too fast, you put weight on. If the bar's moving too slow, you take weight off. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's also really good. And this is, I've read a couple of places that a couple of people have written articles and blogs where they said that velocity based training wasn't good for kids, that kids need to spend time in the weight room, getting, focusing on technique, getting stronger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, before they try velocity based training. But really, the benefits of velocity based training are go hand in hand with making sure that young men and young women don't train too heavy, because you can put velocity stops on them and say, I don't want the bar to go slower than 0.65 meters per second. And at 6.5 meters per second, they're going to be able to do multiple reps, and they're going to be able to do multiple reps very well. And then you tell them that at any point during the set that weight drops below 0.6 meters per second, you stop and then you rack it up. So that's about a 10% velocity decrement.
That's
A
awesome.
little less than 10% velocity decrement. So it's easy to use it for both strength and working on technique and working on your explosive strength and technique, because you can do things with a barbell when it's light that you can't do with the barbell when it's heavy. So you can load
Mm-hmm.
them up a little bit and say, okay, here's your velocity zone. Stick in this velocity zone right here and perform the set. And when it goes above or below it, you stop. And so that's what I like about it. But then I
Mm-hmm.
also like the answer about trap bars. And, looking back, that is one thing that I kind of wish that I would have done. one, I wish I always bought, the cheapest hex bar I could find. I never had the great big ones. Probably would have done if I'd have spent. I was a cheapskate, you know me, man. I only bought what we needed, and if we didn't need it, I didn't buy it. If we weren't going to use it, I didn't buy it. And I would always buy something new and try it out. I just wouldn't go buy 20 whatevers. I'd buy one and I'd pass it around the weight room, tell everybody to use it. In fact, we had a sample of a velocity based system that somebody sent us as a sample. We were using Tendos at the time, and I put it on one coach's rack, and he said, "Coach, I hate it." And then I said, "All right." So I moved it to another rack, and the guy was like, "Coach, I can't use it. It's too slow. The exercises are different, and no matter where I put that device, none of my staff members would use it." And then when we switched to perch, everybody wanted to use it. So, that's the way the trap bars would have been, I think.
Oh yeah.
And so y'all have 6'8" basketball players at your school.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. In your mind, you think it's completely different when I was growing up with basketball these days. I mean, they are athletic, can jump through the roof, which you know this, but like it's at a higher level than I thought for high school. Yeah. Whenever you see it, I mean, I have kids jumping through the roof. I mean, we have kids that, our point guards are still 6'1", 6'2". I mean, it's unbelievable the size. I mean, we had one kid that was like 6'10", and it's amazing how athletic and gifted they are, how long they are. You're actually watching them. You'd almost think it's like, hey, it's Division I basketball program. Like it's unbelievable the strides they've made in terms of how athletic they are, how gifted they are. It's amazing to see. That and volleyball are the two that come to my mind.
Yeah.
How athletic our girls are. So our girls volleyball program is won state or been state runner up last 3-4 years. So it's been a great program in that regard. And so you watch them, and it's just that's the those two come to mind, how long and how tall they are. About that helping out those trap bars. I really like trap bars.
How big? What's the student body at?
I want to say we're pushing up almost on 3,000.
Yeah.
So you get like I said, we're one of the fastest growing schools. UIL does every 2 years. They change the classifications. If they changed it this year, so it'll change after this upcoming year. But if they changed before this year, we'd have been 6A. We'd have been the biggest division. Right now, we're the second biggest division in Texas. And like I said, if they did it this year, we'd have been 6A. I mean, we're a very fast growing school. And so if we're not at 3, we're very close. We'll be at 3 after this year for sure.
If 3, y'all move to 6A, whose district would y'all be in? Do you know the district? Who would y'all be playing? Katy? Would y'all be playing the Katy school system?
That's $1 million question right there. Yeah. So it could be a multitude of different districts. I don't think it would end up being Katy, just because they already have so many schools
to play among themselves.
Yeah, they have so many schools. They're building another school too. I think they'll already be set in how many numbers they have. The closeness, you would think it would be that, but I don't think that would happen. But that's really the $1 million question. Coaches are always curious to know what it is, and sometimes what you think it is ends up being different whenever the UIL does their realignment.
That's the way it is here in Louisiana, with the LHSAA. If you think what they're fixing to do, you're sadly mistaken. It changes. Mm-hmm. So. All right, good deal. All right, last question. Okay. What advice would you give the young 6th and 7th and 8th graders in the Fulshear community that would prepare them for a high school experience in athletics?
I'd say number one, play as many sports as you can. That's not even necessarily a Fulshear thing. That's every day. Any sport you enjoy playing, play it.
Yeah.
And you look at all the studies and what have you. The most successful athletes typically played multiple sports. And so you talk about injuries as well, being specific to one sport, and you're year round in that sport. You don't have an off season. You don't have time to break, especially when I think of like basketball, where you're jumping all the time. And if you're playing that year round, you're just asking for issues. I'd say work on movements first and foremost. Again, teaching those movements as well as anything rhythmic. That's one thing I think has gone down for younger athletes is you watch them do like an A skip or an easy skip and anything or a high knee karaoke. The rhythm's not there. It's very strange. Like I've never seen so many kids typically that opposite arm, opposite leg, and just that rhythmic deal. It's like I think like a lot of PE teachers are failing them growing up at elementary and early junior high. So those rhythmic movements as well. I think those are critical. I think be able to transition. A lot of kids they'll come to me and be like, I squat 225. And I'm like, I bet you I can find a lot of mistakes, and I bet you you're not going even parallel. And typically, that's the answer. And so kids are always typically torn on numbers. I try to preach that we're not worried about that. At a certain point, numbers, typically do matter. I use the example we had our like star running back. I've had him since a freshman, and he's district MVP. I think last year he had 3,000 all-purpose yards, something crazy, and he was on B team in junior high. And then freshman, he was talented, but it wasn't near what he was. He came in, and I don't think he could squat 150. Now he's squatting over 450, and it's near impossible to bring him down. I mean, you look at him, you see him, he's just small in stature, and then you watch him, like it takes multiple guys to bring him down. His leg strength is just incredible. But he started out at, 185 and really couldn't do that as well. And so I use that as an example, like just be ready to be able to move, have those movements done correctly. And if you're doing that before you step foot on the high school, you're a big step ahead. And don't get caught up in the numbers. Numbers don't matter, especially at that age. We're looking at what you're trying to be as a junior and a senior. And so just be prepared to that. And good thing is the junior high does get a decent amount of exposure from us. I typically work them out too during the summer. We have lifting groups for junior high as well, so they get to see me and interact. And typically it's a bunch of movement stuff and working cohesively with that. But I think those are the critical things at that age. Don't get caught up in weight. Don't get caught up in how much you lift, because at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. It's what you're doing as a junior or a senior, sometimes sophomore. So we're trying to build you for the future. We're not trying to build you to be ready to go now. We're trying to take those steps, and then whenever you hit those, you do have huge increases in maxes when you can move that bar well without going heavy first. And so again, it's the end game. It's not the beginning game with them. It's what I would preach to them.
Good deal. Well, man, I appreciate it. Great job.
I appreciate you having me. It's been a while.
Yeah. And, it's great that you were able to take the time today to do it, to share your journey, your mission, and the things that you value and that have been successful there, and passing it on. And that's the part that I enjoy most about doing this podcast. It's promoting what you do there, and then how that can help our listeners regardless. And you said some really good things throughout the entire podcast that can help coaches at every level. And, the podcast has been extremely successful, and I've told a lot of our former guests that, and I didn't think this would be true until I started looking at the analytics. And Brian Johnson was our first guest and did a phenomenal job. And in fact, that he did such a good job. It's been almost a year. I've thought about re-releasing his episode, but he still averages over 30 downloads a month. And it's been almost a year. So every day that Brian gets up, and every day that Paul Jackson gets up, and every day that Craig Fitzgerald, and every day that Matt Mullis gets up, there will be someone out there listening to this podcast. And so it's the gift that keeps on giving. And there'll be people listening to this podcast for years to come. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time today to do this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was fun.
All right. So you can connect with Coach Matthew Mullis on Twitter. I'm not going to say X. I'm still going to call it Twitter. At Mullis Strength, and it's MULLIS Strength. I appreciate your time today, and good luck with the rest of the season, and go Chargers.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Coach.